Hey everybody, and welcome to this explanation of Milestone 4. We're getting towards the end of the project, so we're on the last of the 4 Ps at this point. So, this one's all about your marketing message. This is the promotions end of it, and we think about promotions as being a messaging apparatus. It's just a way for us to say what we want to say to our target market about our product. So, you want to review who your target market is. You want to be real clear who that is. What wants and needs will you address? And you can go back to your product discussion to kind of come to terms with that. That's really, really important that you do that. And understand also that you're part of an existing brand. Mr. B's Guacamole is part of a larger company that has a particular marketing message out there. The question is, do you want to leverage that in your messaging here? More often than not, you probably do want to leverage that. But if you were, let's say, for example, in introducing a new product, that's quite a departure from your existing product base and your existing target market. What's important about that is that you might want to unhinge that and say, like, okay, well, we're not part of that brand. And I can tell you, this is from personal experience, you might want to do that when you are approaching a totally new target market with a new product. Because the association with the old brand is going to be negative. I don't think that's the case here, but you may see it that way. But that's your option. You have to make that decision. So the very first step is to set your objectives for your advertising, for your promotion. What is the primary goal of your introductory advertising? Because remember, we are introducing a new product, so this is important. It's not exactly the same kind of decision-making process that goes into promoting an existing product, right? So are you trying to build up your awareness or your brand association? Do you want to get them to act on an offer? Again, this is introductory, so that's not a bad idea. But I can tell you this, under any circumstance, your advertising needs to have some call to action and have the consumer actually act on the ad. There's lots and lots of reasons to do that, but not the least of which is to draw them in and get them connected to your brand. So step one is also, we might want to think about what's the primary approach to your ad, and if you recall what you've read about in the text, they kind of split it out. This is not the only way to do it, but it's a good way to frame it. It's fine. And you can think about it as being cognitive or emotional. So if it's a cognitive, it's sort of a rational message. It's like, are we trying to compare things? Are we trying to point out a particular aspect of our product that we're really trying to push? So those are kinds of things that we need to think about when we take a cognitive approach. An emotional approach is a little bit more stepped back and saying, like, okay, we want to connect to the more emotional side of the target. For example, showing your product being used by a family or friends at a party. Now, when I say this and these approaches, they aren't like all in on one or the other. They are a mix of both, probably. But one of them is going to be primary, and it's going to be supportive of what your message really is. So depending on your approach, you might design your ad differently. So if it's a cognitive approach, you might concentrate on primary feature in what's referred to as a one-sided approach. And a two-sided approach is sort of a pros and cons approach, and you've seen these before. It's like, here's who we are, here's who our competitor is, and we're better. If it's emotional, you could use a dramatic approach. You can address a problem with a product as a solution, for example. Using our particular examples, like, okay, so you have friends coming over, you want to impress them with this wonderful condiment called Mr. B's guacamole. So you could show that easily in a more emotional approach, okay? I mention this because they do mention it in the text. I think you have to tread very, very lightly here, especially in today's climate. A negative emotional approach through humor can really, really easily backfire on you, so you have to be very, very careful with that. So, anyway, it's promoted as something you can take a look at. So now you want to outline the message, right? So you want to outline what the primary message is. This should start to flow, right? So your primary message is like, okay, I've identified, this is what I think my most important aspect, my biggest advantage is. Go back to your positioning statement. I'm looking for an advantage. What is that we need to incorporate that in there? Outline the supporting message that backs that up. You can optionally introduce a secondary message. You have to be a little bit careful with that. So think about this. Think about a television advertisement. It's usually about 30 seconds long. That's a lot to say in a very short period of time. So if you can naturally make it flow and do that, go for it. But if you can't, stick to your primary message and go with it, okay? And what's the closing? The closing is a really, really important part of your advertisement. So you want people to act on the message that you're presenting to them. It might be that could come in literally hundreds of ways. So it could be getting them to act on the thing. I'm going to use an example that I've seen. For example, is that like go to our website, put in this website address in the URL, and it'd be like TV advertising or radio or something like that to get a promotion. It's just that's a closing. It's a way for you to say, act on the message, act now, and you get something for it. And then the last thing I want you to consider is how you measure its effectiveness. There's a lot of things presented in the text. You pick one of those, and the one that resonates best with you, and explain why you think it's the best way for you to measure the effectiveness of your messaging. I think I can tell you this is a very important thing you have to do, and you want to be vigilant about measuring that effectiveness, okay? So you've crafted your message. This is a two-step process. So you're thinking about, now, where do you say it, right? So marketing channels are a really, really important decision to make here, and one that is important from the standpoint of a marketing expense standpoint. So you can spend a lot of money on a particular marketing channel but not get anything for it. So, and how are we going to make that work exactly right? So you have to think about the channels. This actually is not that difficult of a question if you really understand who your target market is. Where does your target market get information? Where does your target market seek entertainment? Where does your target market look for ideas? Research products. There's lots of different things you can consider here. Many, many questions. But you need to think about that. But the whole point of this is it's not that hard to do from the standpoint that once you understand where they get this information from, that's where you want to meet them. Okay, so meet them where they are. That's those were always my words when I described, okay, what channels are we going to choose? And it's really not that hard of a decision to make if you understand where they are. So you're going to meet them there with your message, okay? But it's not as simple of an answer as you might think, but that's what you have to consider. So let's take a look at an example here. So in the 1960s, television advertising was big, especially if you're the let's say the manager of a consumer product that is sold nationally, okay? And very likely we would have picked television as a way to do that, okay? So television ad time in those days was by time slots on national networks. So if your product was national and it didn't give you any chance to customize your message in any way, shape, or form, you just roll it out and say this is what it is. And you go through national networks. You could do local advertising on local stations, but those were very limited in their reach and their effectiveness. This has changed dramatically. Now, just speaking of television, okay? So cable television came along, And when that happened, it introduced, when I say thousands, that's probably understating it, tens of and hundreds of thousands of new time slots that you could choose to advertise through, and you can even target them through specific channels. Okay, so back in the network days, it was basically 3 networks. Now we're talking about hundreds of channels that you could potentially advertise through, and you could tailor that advertising message and buy time slots and choose time slots in local markets. Even if it was a national message, you could do it that way, so you could go through and change all these different things. So it just exponentially grew the number of decisions you would have to make, and you could act in a very real-time way. So clearly technology has taken over. Advertising media buyers were a very lucrative job back in the 1960s, and what was roughly centered around then. But that's been taken over by AI and big data, as I've talked about all through class. And it's really changed how we do that, because there's just way too many choices to make, and we have to have computers to help us to do that. This is really hard to read, I'll admit it, but this is a fantastic slide, and I'm only going to show it to you from this standpoint, is to show how it's shifting. And I honestly don't know one that shows it better. So this was done from a research study that was done between 1980 and 2020. It continues today. There's nothing here that has been reversed or anything like that or changed. In fact, it's only been accentuated over that time. So please take a good close look at that. I believe that's in our D12 shell. So take a good close look at it. It will help you make some decisions about what channels you're thinking about for your market. Okay. And one other thing I want to show you is the change in ad spending. This was just from 1 year to the next, is how much more people and marketers are intending to spend on CTV, social media, paid search. You can see all the different things there. Very much so when you look at the top choices, they're digital spends, okay? And these big spends that we were making back in the previous days are continuing to whittle down. Linear TV, which is broadcast, cable, things like that. Those are being spent slightly less on. By the way, these numbers are a little deceiving because we still spend a huge amount more on this linear TV than we do in other channels. And other traditional media, which are radio, print, direct mail, that kind of thing. Outdoor advertising. So that's actually also shrinking. One thing I just want to kind of put a reality check on this is that while we're seeing that decline, it's still a huge amount of money being spent on those things. So let's take a look about Milestone 4, what's involved. So you want to summarize your target market. Figure that's about a paragraph, because that's going to frame all the rest of your conversation. What are your ad objectives, as we described here? You want to talk about what goes into the design of your ad. Be creative here. You know what? This is not one that you're going to base on research. It's going to be based on the research you've already done and all the positioning you've already done, okay? And then you want to outline your message, same thing. And then define your marketing channels. That's something you want to be able to do. You're going to have a primary channel, and then you're going to have secondary channels. In reality, you would be looking at a much more complex thing than what we're going to describe here, but that's all right. We can keep it simple because it gets to the point of where is your target looking for this information. So you want to meet them where they are. And finally, you want to summarize why this ad will best connect with your market. So this is a pretty complex one. It's a pretty complex decision to make. But you can pull this off. You can do it in a very, very generalized way. If you have any questions, let me know. I wish you the best of luck with this. All along now, I hope you're updating your milestones, and that's time well spent, because when you go to put this final project together, you're just simply going to borrow from all those things. Okay, let me know if you have any questions, and best of luck with Milestone 4.